Should you be buying property at auction? I'm stood right now in my latest property refurbishment purchase, and yes, I bought this one at auction. So the short answer is yes, there's some great deals to be had when you go to auction, but there's lots of things that you need to consider before you go placing those bids. So there's deals to be had because traditionally auctions are associated as a place where a seller can benefit from a quick sale and the certainty of sale, which is very attractive. So if they've had a buyer pull out in the past, they weren't able to sell the property for whatever reason, auction can be seen as a certain sale. So once that buyer has ultimately placed their bid, it's been accepted, they've agreed to sell, they are legally bound to buy that property. So the seller has reassurance knowing it's going to sell. And if you're massively impatient like me as a buyer, that's great too, because you can get the keys really quickly and get straight in, started with a refurbishment as soon as possible. So that's why I love buying at auction as well. So there are deals to be had, that's for sure. But at the same time, just because a property is in auction doesn't guarantee that it's a good deal. Just because it's falling to bits and it's stinky and it's horrible doesn't mean it's actually advertised at a price that makes any sense for you to buy if you're looking to refurbish it, sell it on and make a profit. So it's crucial that when you're buying at auction or buying in any other circumstance that you understand your numbers in advance. You know what the property is going to be worth. Once it's refurbished, you know what it's going to cost to refurbish, you know your buying and selling costs, and you've got your target profit in mind that you need to make all that worthwhile. Your time, your energy, your effort in making that deal happen from start to finish. So it's crucial to know that in advance. So when you go to auction and you bid, you've got that maximum offer in mind and you don't exceed it. Even if you get excited on the day and emotional or whatever, don't exceed that offer. You've got that maximum bid and you stick to it. That's really crucial at auction, so you don't get carried away. So there are great deals to be had, but like any other method of buying, it's a numbers game. So just because a property is at auction doesn't mean it's a good deal. It just means it's an auction. So you've got to get it at the right price to make it work for you. So that's understanding your numbers in advance. It's really, really crucial. And also be aware that some properties are at auction for a reason, because no other fucker wants to buy them in some cases. So you might look at a property and say, oh, that looks cheap. But if you do some further digging, there might be a reason why the property is cheaper than comparable properties in the area. And that reason might mean that actually it's not even cheap at all. It's just well priced considering the shit that the property comes with as baggage that you have to sort out. So what do I mean by that? Now, of course, there could be major structural defects. There could be big subsidence that you need to put right, which could be very costly. Or there could be, in some cases, a problem with the lease. So if the lease is a very short lease, in many cases, most lenders won't even want to mortgage the property. Now, lenders have different criteria, but generally speaking, if a lease on a leasehold property is less than 70 years remaining, then most lenders won't even want to touch it. Now, if you're buying a property to sell on, so you're looking to refurbish it and sell it on by buying at auction, you probably should, in most cases, be using bridging finance or cash or private finance rather than a mortgage. Because most auctions, they'll typically have a deadline of 28 days that you need to buy that property from the point where you actually get your bid accepted. Now, usually, most lenders won't work that fast. So you don't really want to be using mortgage finance. So you might be using cash or bridging or private finance, which is fine. But remember, you're going to be selling this property to someone who, at the end of all that, will be needing a mortgage. So if the property has a really short lease, then they're knackered because they're not going to get a mortgage at the end of it. And you're knackered because you won't be able to sell the property. Bad news. So make sure you don't do that. Make sure you've looked at the legal pack and you've asked your solicitor to check the legal pack so you know there's no problems like that that could make the exit, so the sale of that property, more difficult than it needs to be. Another way it can make it more difficult than it needs to be, or another thing to look out for, is properties that are classed as non-standard construction. So any property that's not brick built with a standard roof, so it's tile or slate roof, is classed as non-standard construction. So for example, it could be a steel frame built property. Now, the problem with those types of properties is many lenders want nothing to do with them. Some lenders might lend on them, but do you really want to do a project where you have to tell your prospective buyer to go and choose XYZ lender? to buy that property because no other lender wants to finance it. That's not a great situation. Basically, you could still make it work, but you're making things harder for yourself compared to just buying a property that, in theory, most people are just going to want to buy, and you're going to have buyers lining up to buy it because it doesn't have any of those problems. So make sure you're familiar with the type of build, and you make sure you avoid anything that has any problems with the lease that cannot be rectified before the auction. So once you get legally bound to buy that property, that's it, you're stuffed. So make sure you've done your due diligence in advance. And if you do that, and you're speaking to your solicitor and you're getting the advice off them to make sure that you're not going to buy a property that's going to be really hard to sell for whatever reason, then you can go ahead with confidence and buy at auction. You can get some great deals at auction. But just as any other way of buying property, the auction is not some solution that you just go in and find all the below market value deals. It's just a way of buying property. And there's routinely many people that will pay way more than they should in the auction room. So don't get carried away. And it's just another way of buying property. Just as any other method, open market, off market, through agents, there's loads of different ways of buying property. You need to make sure that you've done your research and you don't get caught out by any nasty surprises. And if you can do that, you can succeed at auction. One quick tip I'll give you as well is make sure you don't wait until the day of the auction. There's plenty of deals to be had pre-auction. So put that offer, if you know that deal works, you can get that offer in before the auction date even starts. And you never know what's going through in the mind of the seller. They might be really motivated to do a deal. And if you put that offer in, you might be the only one who's offering prior to auction. I've done that several times and I've got some really good bargains for doing it. So make sure you don't wait until the day of the auction. And also make sure you look at properties that fail to meet the reserve. So on the day of the auction, if they fail to meet the reserve price, you can swoop in and you can negotiate a great deal, because in many cases, if a seller's put their property to auction thinking this was going to be the guaranteed exit, the guaranteed way of getting rid of the property, and it doesn't sell, you can imagine they're going to be, in many cases, even more motivated to do a deal with you, possibly at a much lower price. So that's another thing to consider as well. So if you keep all that in mind, you can succeed buying at auction. And hopefully, in some way, you found this video useful. If so, go ahead, like, share, comment below, and you'll see me again soon in the next one.